Hello there Pixel Pushers, it's Sadiq Hussain here with another tutorial on Affinity Photo. This time looking at a third method of color grading, the subtractive method. So we've already done a couple of different ways of doing color grading, and if we go to the we've got this photograph here of a tennis player at the local club in Edgbaston in Birmingham a few years ago, and I'm sitting here in my tennis club after just having a game on one of the indoor courts. So if we go to the adjustment layers, and we've done recolor and we've done gradient map, but if we go to selective color, okay, and let me just explain how this selective color works. First of all, you can select different colors for it to affect in the picture. So if you wanted to affect the yellows only, you select that, and so on. Okay, but let me just show you a couple of things. When you make different colors from the additive method, which is using your red, your greens and your blues, when you add those together on an electronic display with light, you add the different the three primary colors to make your different range of colors of the spectrum. But when you're doing subtractive colors for inks, then you're using the magenta, the yellow and the cyan primary colors, and with a little bit of black as well to give greater clarity. But just look at the three primary colors: cyan, yellow and magenta. And if you look at the opposite of those, so if you remove magenta, you'd get green. If you remove yellow, you get blue, so you reveal blue. And this selective color method is what allows you to do that, which I'll demonstrate. So if you want to add yellow, you obviously move the yellow slider up, but if you want to add blue, you don't add blue by moving a blue slider, because there isn't one. You reduce the yellow one to give you the blue. Okay, so using this as the background, if we click on this image then, and we've got the selective color option. Remember, you've got the cyan, magenta and yellow, and like I said, you have got black as well if you want to use that, and we'll show you how that works. So if wherever there's a yellow color in here, and of course the grass will be predominantly green and yellow, if I remove the cyan from that, it gives it more of a red color. Okay, so removing the cyan, if you go back to here, if you remove the cyan, if you reduce this, it increases red. Okay, so if we go back to that, and if you reduce the cyan, it gives you more red, but the red is predominantly in the grass because it's the yellows that we're affecting, and green grass is made up of a lot of yellow. Okay, let me show you a different way. If we go to the reds, now in this picture the majority of the reds will be in the skin tones here. Okay, the skin tones has got predominantly red in it. So if we wanted to increase the redness, if we go back to the color model, if we want to increase the redness, we have to reduce the cyan. So if we now reduce the cyan here, because it's the reds we're affecting, not the yellows as before, so we're moving the same slider, but this time we won't affect the grass. See, the grass isn't changing, but the legs are getting redder. And the reason is because it's subtracting the cyan from the reds only, and if you do that on that color model, it increases the reds while you're subtracting the cyan. Obviously you can increase the cyan if you want, so that reduces the red. You can increase the magenta, but if you decrease the magenta, it makes it more green. Okay, reduce the magenta. If you look at that color model again, reduce the magenta, it gives you more green. Okay, so we reduce the magenta and the legs become green. So if you want to do a Incredible Hulk type thing, that's the easy way to do it. Okay, and obviously if you change the yellows, if you reduce the yellows, it's giving it more. Reduce the yellows, it introduces more blue, into the image. Okay, there's a bluish tint there. So now that we know that, in principle, our color grading can work to, you know, whatever we want to do. So we can just go through and say we want to change the yellows there, maybe give them a bit of a bleached effect, the grass, because we want to give it a bit of a color grade. Okay, and we can change by changing the black levels, we can make it a bit darker or a bit lighter. So maybe a bit lighter, and then go to the reds, and we might want to change the colour, make the legs a bit redder, more complementary to the skin tones. Okay, you can lighten the skin tones there, darken the skin tones. That's quite powerful. Let's just lighten it a bit. Okay, and then the whites, the white lines. So if we go to the whites, so we can. This is why this is called the Selective Colour Adjustment Layer, and for color grading, it gives you a huge amount of power without having to select an area. You just select that part of the image, that part of the color spectrum in an image, and then you can change. And then if you wanted to, you know what I want you to have a look at is the white line. So reduce the cyan in that. See if there's any magenta. No, there isn't much. Yellow, bit of yellow maybe. It just makes the whites whiter. Okay. So the whites are whiter, and of course the top will be as well, which is fine. If we want to change the blue in the skirt there, in the clothing. So remember on here, if we want to increase the blues, it's the yellows we have to change. So if we go back to the adjustment layer and go to yellow, okay, and you can just move these sliders to give you the effect that you want. Okay, and if we're looking for the vintage look, because we're doing a color grade, aren't we? This is the essence of the color grade. But I wanted to explain how this selective color, this subtractive method works, which is primarily used in printing in inks, whether it's inkjets at home or commercial printing. It's the color model of the yellow, cyan and magenta, rather than the primary colors of red, green and blue, which is for light mixing for image displays. Two different methods, two different sets of primary colors. Okay, and of course if you went down to blue and then you change that, and can you see, if you look now at the skirt, because that's primarily blue, if you move the different sliders, you can change the nature of that without it affecting anything else. So you can make that more of a purple skirt, increase the depth of it. The yellow won't have any effect. You can make it a bit darker or a bit lighter. And so straight away we've changed the grass, we've whitened the white lines, and we've changed the colour of the skirt without having to do any selection at all. So I hope you found that useful. So this is colour grading, but using the selective adjustment layer, and of course with an adjustment layer there's nothing to stop you from using the eraser brush, because there's already a mask on there, and if we use the black brush, then it means we can mask out any of the effect if we wanted to, just by painting with the black brush. So you're blocking out the effect if you wanted to do that. Obviously you do it with a finer brush and in a particular area, so you could block that out because there's a ready-made mask there. Okay, then before we finish this, leave this topic of color grading using the selective color adjustment layer, we've just obviously finished looking at this particular image. Let's just apply it to a couple of others, but this time I'm going to place the color wheel, so to speak, the opposite colors, and how reducing cyan increases the red, how reducing the yellow increases the blue, how decreasing the magenta increases the green, and how these opposites play along with each other when we're talking about subtractive colour theory rather than the additive colour theory, which is the regular red, green, and blue. This is the yellow, cyan, and magenta colour theory, which is the subtractive when we're talking about inks and real life objects that reflect light as opposed to the source of the light. Okay, so we'll just do the exact same thing, but I've actually placed this graphic on top of the image. And so what we do is go down to the adjustment layer as before, and we'll select selective colour just like before. And I'm just going to put this panel over here so you can see the effect of the obviously yellow tennis balls on a green tennis court, keeping on the theme of the tennis. And notice that I've actually put the adjustment layer above the picture. The color wheel image, we don't want that to be affected, so that's actually placed outside of that range, so that adjustment layer being there won't affect that top at all. That's separate, so you won't see these colors change, which of course will won't be what we want. So let's change the yellows. So go to the yellows. So we now know that if we move these sliders, it's going to affect wherever there's yellow. Now the majority of the yellow is in the tennis balls, but there's a little bit in the green of the tennis court as well. So if we are reducing cyan increases the amount of red. So if we reduce that, you can see that the tennis balls have got a little bit more of a reddish tinge to them. Okay, now if we reduce the magenta, it gives us more green. So that means the green court should become richer in green by reducing the magenta. And you can see that. In fact, the green, it becomes more pure green, and in fact the yellow tennis balls become a little bit more green as well. Now the yellow up here, so if we reduce the yellow, the opposite will appear. That means there'll be more blue in the scene. Probably not much. So the image, you wash it out of yellow, but then that means there's a bit more blue. So the tennis balls are a bit washed out. In fact, there's a few more blue pixels there. And obviously, if you increase it, it just increases that colour. Okay, rather than subtract. So if you increase the magenta, you can see a little bit of magenta appearing in the tennis ball. So it doesn't mean you have to decrease it. It just means that you know what to expect as the opposite of the magenta, yellow, and cyan. Okay, so let's go to a different color. Let's obviously go to the greens, and for reduce the cyan, gives us more red. Okay, which is what we looked at earlier. So we'd already done that. So let's go to, there's no blue in there at all. Let's do the magenta. Let's just see what effect. So it'll have very little effect because this picture is mainly made up of greens and yellows, as you can see. Okay, now the black level doesn't have much effect either. Let's go to a different image and try it on this one. So again, I've placed that graphic up there. I've already created an adjustment layer ready, and here you'll see a very stark result. So if we click on the reds, so all the red pixels in the image, if we want to increase the green, for example, then we reduce the magenta. So the opposite color to green is magenta. So if we reduce that magenta slider, that leaf should appear more green. And there it is. Everything, obviously, where there's a red, even in the stem where there's a bit of red, reduce that and that gives us more green. So it's all about color grading. You could grade that different ways. If we reduce the yellow, it gives us more blue in the scene. Okay, so reduce the yellow and you've got more blue coming in, which actually manifests itself as purple. Okay, and the cyan, if we reduce the cyan, it gives us more red. We had already said that, so that increases the red. And obviously, if we increase the cyan, that gives us more cyan. Increase the magenta, gives us more magenta at the top there. Increase the yellow. So let's just do an increase of all of them, and that's just in the reds. And if we go to the yellows, do the same thing, experiment, but as long as you understand that it's the subtractive colour theory rather than the additive colour theory. And you do need to bear in mind, and eventually you'll get this, the opposite of magenta is green, the opposite of yellow is blue, and the opposite of cyan is red. But if not, then get a graphic like this off the internet. Wikipedia has a very good article on it, and then just use that as your reference. Okay, so let's just do a quick colour grade on this. Let's go to the magentas. And of course, there's no reason why you can't combine this type of a colour grade with a different style of colour grade on top of that. You can use them mix and match and to get the right effect that you want. So let me just get rid of that so you can see what the image looks like. Okay, so that's a colour grade. If we turn that colour grade off, that adjustment layer, subtle, but it is there. And the previously, let's just turn that off and turn that off. In fact, turn it back on again. So that's a very subtle effect. Let's change that dramatically. Let's go to yellows and reduce the yellow and give that a totally different look to it. Okay, so we could do that. Go to the greens, change that. So that's definitely a colour grade added to that. Before and then after. Okay, before and then after. On that particular colour grade, it's affecting the grass more than it's affecting the tennis ball. So you can see the variety of effects that you can achieve just by using the selective colour adjustment layer, but bearing in mind it is this subtractive colour theory. I know that's a bit of a mouthful, but have a go and do let us know your thoughts and comments. And the images that you have a go at. And if, like I said, if you haven't subscribed, do subscribe. Thank you very much, and I'll see you next time.